This podcast is brought to you by Most Valuable Podcasts, leading the league in podcasting entertainment.
What's going on, real MVPs? Welcome inside another episode of What's Your Fantasy? Brandon Swanson, along with Ricky Widmer.
What's up, guys?
And we have no video today, so we're strictly audio. It is completely Ricky's fault. I had nothing to do with it, and that is the honest truth.
It is.
Ricky left it in his other car, just like, I left it in my other pants, but Ricky did it with his car. But welcome in. It is going to be another great show. We are excited to be here with you again. But before we really dive into all of that and everything going on in the fantasy football world, gotta first say, you can become a patron. You can become a patron. Support MVP. And it's easy to do. Go to patreon.com and you can certainly become a patron and support MVP. For $10, you can come on a podcast. You can come on this podcast, Talk Fantasy Football with Ricky and I, or you can go on a number of other podcasts on MVP, or even for $1. You can support for $1 as well. We certainly appreciate any support that you can give us. We really do. We wouldn't be able to be here without you, the fans, our listeners, and our very, very big supporters. So definitely go and do that. And hey, we've got MVP gear. We have MVP shirts. And who doesn't want an MVP shirt? Because we all wear them, except for me. I haven't worn it yet, but I will.
Next week you should wear it for this podcast.
I promise. You know what? I think I will. I have to remember. You have to remind me. But go to mostvaluablepodcast.com and check out the store. Definitely check that out. I know that Dave Oster is wearing it, so it doesn't look as good as you might think. But if we put it on somebody else, I bet it would. So just imagine yourself with that MVP shirt on, and I think you would probably like it a little bit more. And then certainly go check us out on iTunes. Give us that 5-star rating because, Ricky, we are not
a couple of good old boys.
Certainly not. Not at all. We're not even talking any SEC here today because why? It's not college.
Well, we might talk about a couple of SEC guys, but not SEC.
All right, well, that is all the housekeeping. That is out of the way, so we're going to dive right in, and we are excited. Wow, this was a great week, too. Was it not? This was a great week, too, just in football. But, Ricky, it felt like it, and you're going to have to let me know in terms of the points. But I'm looking at a couple of my leagues that I'm in. A lot of points scored this week. A lot of guys, a lot of big-time names putting up a whole lot of points this week. In one of my leagues, I had 147 points, another 112.
Is that PPR or normal?
The 147 was PPR, the 112 was standard scoring, and then another one I think I'm going to be around 98, 100, and that's in standard scoring as well. So some pretty good point totals this week. Update us on our league.
Well, before I give you our league, I'm going to give you my personal league first. Well, our personal league with the MVP guys, because this week's the annual Ricky shows up and beats the shit out of Dave week. Not only did Dave have Jay Ajayi leave with an injury, he had LaShawn McCoy leave with an injury. So there's that. But I had Kirk Cousins, 33 points, Todd Gurley, 29 points, Melvin Gordon, 23 points, DeAndre Hopkins, 17, Juju Smith, 18. The rest of my team, Brandon, had a combined, 10, 40. The rest of my team had a combined 15 points. Wow. It was just my wide receivers and running backs. Like, that is why you draft running backs and wide receivers first. And I'm leading 135 to 104, and Dave's got the Bears defense tonight. So let's hope Russell Wilson lights it up tonight on Monday Night Football. He doesn't have to win. He just needs to light it up tonight and avoid Khalil Mack. But our league, we've got, yet again, going into the Monday night game, hoping that the Bears don't do well. This time it's not. Last week it wasn't the Bears. This time it is the Bears. All of our guys have played, and Todd Gurley had a good one in our league, 32.3, 31.1 for Adam Thielen. That's why I drafted him. That is why I drafted him. We're going to get that right there. 14 points for Kyle Rudolph. Almost 13 for Austin Eckler, one of our big waiver wire pickups this week. The only thing that upsets me is Will Fuller came back this week, only 25 points for him. Calvin Ridley decided he can play football finally and had 16 points for himself. So I guess we've got guys on the bench that can play, but we are leading Kyle right now, or Team Super Hippo, and we're leading 135.3 to 105.6. We got to hope, personally, between me and you, that Trey Burton and Allen Robinson do not have games tonight and we win. Because what would be awesome is I screw up the draft like you said I did, not drafting Mike Evans, and we escape with 2 early wins in the season.
Well, that would be huge, Ricky. Actually,
we would escape and go 2-0.
It would be huge. But now you've got to tell me, what has Adam Thielen done in the first 2 weeks? Because that was the big issue that I had with you, the way that you drafted is because you went with Adam Thielen over Mike Evans and Tyreek Hill.
Yeah, I know.
So that's a big issue to me.
I know. I'm not saying I'm wrong.
Well, if you knew, you shouldn't have done it. You let your Vikings love get the better of you, and that's just not right. You have to put that aside.
Honestly, you know who we really should have went with? We really should have went with Deshaun Jackson because he's been lighting it up.
But here's the thing.
He's got actually more points than Mike Evans right now.
But it's
slight, but he's got more points.
Here's the problem with Deshaun Jackson is that he is that bust or nothing guy. And now that he's gone,
Fitzpatrick likes to throw to him.
And now that he's gone 2 weeks of being. Did I say bust or nothing? All or bust. All or bust is what I meant. I'm sorry. I think I said bust or nothing, which is the same thing. So he's a boom or bust.
Yeah.
And he's been boom the first 2 weeks. I have him in one of my leagues. He's been on the bench both times. Both times. I'm going to win both times.
As long as Fitzpatrick's in.
Here's the problem, though, is that if it's not a boom week, it's nothing in the middle. It's never anything in the middle of the road for Deshaun Jackson. He catches a 75-yarder like he did on the first play from scrimmage this past weekend and gets a huge 75-yarder for a touchdown and then has a couple more passes and all of a sudden, boom, he's at 20-some points. Or he has no catches, or he has 3 catches for 40 yards or something like that. It's never in the middle like 5 for 50 and a touchdown. It's like nothing at all, crumbs. Or you're like, wow, he has so many points. I'm almost afraid he scored too much this week to not have points for next week.
Here's something about our team that I want to ask you, and this is a waiver wire thing I'm going to ask you on the podcast, although we probably shouldn't because it's giving away what we may do, but it doesn't matter. If someone snipes him before us, we've got Aaron Rodgers. Aaron Rodgers, though, had 16 points compared to his 24 week one. And he's technically still injured. Like, that knee is not 110%.
So, are you going to bring up Fitzmagic?
Just let me finish.
Okay,
yes, but let me finish.
Because I was going to say, if you are, I want you to hold off on that for a minute. Because I wanted to get into something else first with our team.
Okay.
I was going to just mention to you that
Mike Evans.
Thielen, look at what he's done in his first 2 weeks. Because he put up good numbers this past weekend.
I mean, the first
against
week
the Packers,
wasn't
he did well,
16.
and 16. So he's got 16 and
31. Mike Evans has 27 and 22. Yeah, it's a better average.
So Thielen has still been good.
Yeah.
So I'm not going to apologize for saying that you were ridiculous in doing that. But I will say that so far he has turned out to be good. And what yesterday showed is that a high volume of passes are going to go to him. I mean, a high volume are going to go to him and Diggs. They just are.
And that's why I picked him over like a Stephon Diggs because he usually
Tyreek Hill, you meant?
No, I meant Stephon Diggs.
You picked him over. Oh,
like Stephon Diggs was
not
still
one
there.
of the guys that you told me.
Well, he was still there, but like Tyreek Hill and Mike Evans were the ones that were competing. But if I was talking just Viking guys, I would go with Thielen in a PPR because usually he gets more receptions. So I'm thinking, he'll get more receptions. That's better than Diggs, who will have more yards on less receptions. Tyreek Hill, though, the thing I did not think Kansas City was going to be what their offense has been this year. But Mike Evans probably should have been the pick. But here's the thing I want to ask you, and this is for our team. Do we ride with Aaron Rodgers against Washington or ride with Goff against the Chargers or roll the dice and go with Fitzmagic against Pittsburgh? Because he's had 2 weeks now of 40 points.
To be honest with you, this is what I'm going to say. This is my honest opinion.
Because he's still available.
I would go...
Well, I'm sorry, 42.3 and then 30 points, which is way better than what we've been getting.
I would go with Ryan Fitzmagic. I would.
Okay.
I would definitely do that. And the reason being is because Washington's defense isn't going to light up the scoreboard, but they're not bad. They're a formidable defense. And Aaron Rodgers, this past weekend, he didn't do much. He didn't do much at all. I had him
it was the Vikings defense, though.
Oh, I get it.
Yeah.
I get it. But I had him in my lineup, and I pulled him out before the game started. I put in Deshaun Watson in one of my leagues, and I was happy I did that because Watson outperformed Rodgers for sure, point-wise there. But I don't necessarily trust Aaron Rodgers right now. I know what he did in the Bears game, and people will be like, how can you not trust him? On one leg, he did all that. Well, that's not going to happen all the time. That's not going to happen. It probably shouldn't have happened.
That leg stiffens up after the adrenaline fades.
Oh, totally, it does. And I think that, that's probably partly what played into it in the game on Sunday against the Minnesota Vikings. Yes, the Vikings defense was good, but Aaron Rodgers was not 100% healthy. And clearly the Packers are being pretty open and honest about it. Yeah. He's not 100% healthy. And if it was anybody else, he probably should be sitting out. But I think that going with Ryan Fitzpatrick is what you have to do when you're given those options, because while the Chargers defense isn't the number one defense in football, they're still a good, formidable defense, even without Joey Bosa. And Jared Goff is a good quarterback, but what they've been doing so far, the Rams, is they've been really leaning on that running game. This last week, most of Jared Goff's yards, they were going to Brandon Cooks. I would go with Fitzpatrick. He's had the hot hand. That's the guy that I want to go with. And that's going to lead us into a bigger discussion today of what are you doing if you're sitting with Jameis Winston right now? What are you doing? Because right now, the Bucs don't need Jameis Winston. Why would they? Ryan Fitzpatrick is putting up better numbers than Jameis Winston ever really has with the Bucs. And he's doing it consistently, 2 games consistently against the Eagles and the Saints to start. The Saints in week 1 in New Orleans, and then the Eagles week 2 in Tampa. And you beat both of them. And now you're going to go and play Pittsburgh, a team who just got torched by Kansas City. And I know a lot of people will say, well, that's Kansas City. They have more weapons than Tampa Bay. Well, but look at all of Tampa Bay's weapons. While Tampa Bay's ground game is certainly far inferior to Kansas City's in my mind, they have Deshaun Jackson, they have Mike Evans, they have Chris Godwin, they have O.J. Howard, a tight end who caught a 75-yard touchdown pass yesterday. They have who's the other tight end there that they've
Cameron
got?
Brate.
Cameron Brate,
who they gave a huge extension to.
I mean, Tampa Bay has a lot of weapons and a lot of toys to be able to play with for Ryan Fitzpatrick. Ryan Fitzpatrick should be the guy that you're going with in terms of your question that you asked me. But also, if you're a guy that's sitting with Jameis Winston and you're wondering, what do I do with Winston? Do I hold on to him? Do I drop him? I think you're in a real big quandary.
Are we getting into this before the Antonio Brown stuff, or are we just going to go right into this before that?
I think we go into this and then we'll talk AB.
First off, the thing I want to say is you want to know why Ryan Fitzpatrick likes Cameron Brate, right? It's because not only is he a Chicagoland guy from the Naperville area, he's a Harvard boy. Those Harvard boys got to stick together, man. They got to throw to each other. The Jameis, for me, the Ryan Fitzpatrick thing does not, for a discussion that Mark and I had, and you guys can go check that out on our YouTube channel or on the Onside Kick, iTunes, or any podcast serving website that has the Onside Kick on it. We talked about, if Ryan Fitzpatrick goes 2-1 or 3-0, do you bench him when Jameis comes back? And I said 2-1, 3-0, I'm riding the hot hand. It's like being at the poker table and I'm out of heater. You don't leave the poker table when you're on a heater. That's just the general rule. For fantasy football, I don't think it affects Jameis Winston. Jameis Winston owners, only because I'm looking at it, and I know ESPN is in all the leagues, but in ESPN leagues, he's only owned in 7.9% of leagues. So already there were not a ton of people that were buying in on Jameis Winston. They were going with other quarterbacks in their leagues because he's probably now in the bottom 16 of quarterbacks in fantasy football. The thing that I think it affects more is if you're a Mike Evans owner, if you're a Deshaun Jackson owner, if you are a O.J. Howard or Cameron Brate owner, because if they go away from Ryan Fitzpatrick, this offense is going to look a lot different. And the guy I would be worried about the most is if you are a Deshaun Jackson owner in this offense, because the thing that they were just saying today is Jameis Winston last year didn't even look like Deshaun Jackson was open last year. Jameis Winston just A, couldn't hit him, B, wasn't looking at him. Where Ryan Fitzpatrick, he's a guy that's going to look more downfield. He is seeing Deshaun Jackson wide open, and he is hitting it. Do you want to know a fun fact, by the way, about Deshaun Jackson that I learned from Trey Wingo today?
I love fun facts.
Not only does Deshaun Jackson have, I believe it was when he was with the Eagles, has the most 50 yards or more catches with the Eagles, he is also the player that has the most 50 yards or more touchdown catches against the Eagles as well. Like, that's just what he does, is he stretches the field. And if you're a Deshaun Jackson owner, you are loving it right now, because 31.6 in the first game. You've got 22.9 in this last game. And if Jameis Winston comes in, if I'm a Deshaun Jackson owner, I'm going, great. I'm not going to see those numbers, where you're hoping Ryan Fitzpatrick continues to play well so that you can put Deshaun Jackson in your starting lineup and know he's going to get points each and every week.
Deshaun Jackson last year, to your point of talking about how he was with Jameis Winston, he had just 50 catches on this season, targeted 91 times, way less than 1,000 yards, 668 yards, 3 touchdowns. He's already matched his touchdown total from last season. He has 9 catches.
So sad.
Listen to this. In 2 games played, he has 9 catches on 9 targets. Every time he's been thrown the ball, he's caught it. 275 yards, 3 TDs. His longest pass play last year went for 41 yards. This year already 75, and it was on the first play from scrimmage this past week against Philly.
He's on pace for 2,128 yards through 2 games.
So
and
that
I know
won't
it's only
happen,
2 games. I know that won't happen, but even if I'm going to divide that by 2, even if he's half of that, he's an 1,000-yard receiver this year.
Well, he only needs 393 more yards to get to where he was last season.
Exactly.
It's crazy.
He can do that in 2 games.
And if you're Tampa Bay, you don't mess this up.
No.
You don't mess this up. You have to. And what you can clearly tell with Tampa Bay, too, is that they're playing so relaxed. Just by what Ryan Fitzpatrick did yesterday in his press conference, which I thought was
Conor
awesome.
McGregor?
It was hysterical. It was great. That shows they're relaxed, they're feeling good, they're having fun. And that's the biggest thing, is I don't think that Tampa Bay's had fun in quite some time. So now they're having fun. It's with Ryan Fitzpatrick, and maybe the suspension to Jameis Winston is what they needed. Maybe that's what they needed, because maybe I'm not trying to say that the journeyman is better than the young guy, but maybe right now it is. Maybe right now he is, and this is what needs to happen. And certainly for the rest of the team, you need to do this, because, like you said, Jameis comes in, everything's going to be different. It really will. The distribution will be different. Howard won't be probably getting the looks he's getting. It'll swing towards Brait. It'll probably go back to inconsistency for Deshaun Jackson. He won't be targeted on the long balls as much anymore. We're looking for Mike Evans' numbers to possibly go down. Mike Evans had one of the worst statistical seasons so far last season, and especially in terms of touchdowns. Ryan Fitzpatrick is doing a great job right now with this team, and every player around him. If you own them, you're doing well. If you don't, try and go get him if they haven't been scooped up yet. Chris Godwin in one of my leagues is still available. The guy has scored touchdowns in both of the games so far this season.
Only 34% of ESPN leagues have Chris Godwin, and he's got 13 and 16 points respectively. A little bit more than that with the points, but just rounding a little bit. But I mean, I'll even go to the next guy down with, you're not going to get anything with the next few guys. I like Humphreys, I know he was getting some receptions, but nothing like super important. Like 5.7 was his big one in week 1. But that's the big thing I think that this plays into is, not if you're a Jameis Winston owner, because I don't know anybody that's a Jameis Winston owner. I know I'm not and never will be. But I think that this decision is going to impact other guys, the guys who own Jackson, Evans, Brait, and O.J. Howard.
You're absolutely right. That's who it's going to affect, and that's why if you are an owner of one of those guys, you are praying that Jameis Winston is not coming back right away when his suspension is over. And truthfully, for the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, I think they have to stay with Fitzpatrick. You have to go with the guy who is getting you wins. It's not. I know that we're talking fantasy, and that's what we want to focus on. But at the end of the day, you want to go with the guy who's getting you wins. If he's putting up, let's say he's putting up crazy fantasy numbers, but he's 0-3, you go back to Jameis. But if he's putting up crazy fantasy numbers and he's 3-0 or he's 2-1 to start the season, you stick with him. You're happy with that. And if your one loss is to a Steeler team that the Steelers are good. Let's be clear about that. The Pittsburgh Steelers are a very good football team. They're struggling right now without Le'Veon Bell. With Le'Veon Bell, most likely do they beat the Chiefs? Probably. In Pittsburgh? Probably. The Chiefs, though, you have to give them a lot of credit as well. But this Pittsburgh team is a team that I feel right now very beatable. Very beatable. And the way that Tampa Bay's playing, very beatable. Tampa Bay just beat the defending Super Bowl champs handily. Score did not show that. But they beat them handily.
Let's be honest, though. The Eagles haven't been the best team. They've been kind of Super Bowl hangover.
They haven't, and they haven't been playing with Carson Wentz. But let's remember, they won the Super Bowl without him. So I think that, yes, maybe you can throw out the Super Bowl hangover type of thing, but still, they're playing with the guys who won them that Super Bowl.
But here's the thing I'm going to say, and I know this is away from the fantasy a little bit. I was thinking about this yesterday. It tells you a lot about where in the season you are. Where when Nick Foles came in, that team hit a heater right at the right time and carried that momentum into a Super Bowl. They didn't have that same momentum coming into this year, and it's showing. And it shows that Nick Foles just jumped on a hot, not saying that Nick Foles isn't good, he jumped on the hot team and basically rode with that hot team and didn't do anything to screw up, made some plays. Of course, he made that touchdown catch that was huge. You look at Tom Brady and, he almost got it. Just got to be a little bit quicker, making fun of Tom Brady in that commercial. But the one thing I did want to give some love to is from our onside kick discussion with the Ryan Fitzpatrick thing. Rick H, or Rich, however you want to pronounce it, because he put his last initial. He hit it on the head for me. But he said, Bucs fan since 1976. I like Winston and think he can be good, but if Fitzpatrick goes 2-1 or 3-0 against Saints, Eagles, and Steelers, you can't pull Fitz. The first rule when it comes to coaching, always go with the hot hand.
I think you're right. I think you're absolutely right, 100%. Now, Ricky, let's take a look now into the next topic here. We're talking AB, Antonio Brown.
This is one that you wanted to hit on.
Who said today, yeah, fine. You don't think I'm that good? Trade me. See how it goes for another team.
All right, Maurice Jones-Drew. Not as bad as I remember. Maurice Jones-Drew the one year had a huge run. He's running it, going to be like a 80-yard touchdown. And he goes, kneels on the one, and he goes, bring the backup out and let the backup get the touchdown because he didn't want fantasy owners to get that touchdown because he hated fantasy football.
Yet he played it.
Did he?
Yet he played it.
No, I know he was very critical of like people that were like, what are you doing? You give me fantasy. He goes, all right, I'll kneel on the one and let my backup get the touchdown.
Maurice Jones-Drew played fantasy football, that's for sure. He was open about that. But the reason I want to bring up Antonio Brown, Ricky, is because so far, to start this season, Antonio Brown has been pretty quiet. He has been pretty quiet. The guy actually outperforming him is Juju Smith-Schuster, who is an emerging star over in Pittsburgh. That's a guy who you definitely need to be owning, but should you be worried? Should people be worried about Antonio Brown? And do you think that with Le'Veon Bell out, them not having to cover against him in the passing game, do you think that that is something that could possibly be playing into it? I know that for me, Antonio Brown is a guy that for the longest time, you want him on your football team. You absolutely want him on your fantasy football team because he's going to get you some good points. But in my standard league, he is, through 2 weeks, he's the 22nd wide receiver. He has scored 22 points in 2 weeks, 15 points week 1, 6 points week 2, and only the 1 touchdown. These are not Antonio Brown type of statistics.
And I mean, it depends on what kind of a league you're in. Like for our PPR league, he had 24 points in week 1, about just under 16, about 15.7 in week 2. And here's what I nail it to and why we're seeing a little bit. The Le'Veon is part of it. I mean, without Le'Veon there being a receiver at the backfield and maybe defense is not basically thinking of James Conner as a big enough threat as they would do. They still got to defend against him, but it's not like they've got Le'Veon back there. They can maybe target Antonio Brown a little bit. The other thing you got to think about is this, and I'm just going back in the way back machine a little bit, where I am going to start this ride from, I might go back one more year than I'm at right now. I'm already 2015, but I might go back to 2014 for this example, and I will. So, okay, 2014. Here were the leading receivers, top 5 leading receivers for the Pittsburgh Steelers. You had AB, who had about 1,700 yards, just shy of that, 13 touchdowns. Then Le'Veon Bell with 854, Heath Miller with 761, Marcus Wheaton at 644, Martavius Bryant at 549. Martavius Bryant, I remember Marcus Wheaton, they would have big weeks, but they were never digging into AB's receptions and AB's yards. You get the same thing in 2015 where you've got AB, almost a 2,000-yard receiver. Martavius Bryant, the next one behind him, only 756 yards, but 6 touchdowns, where AB only had 10 touchdowns that year. Then you've got 2016, where the leading receiver, again, Antonio Brown, but he only had 1,200, almost 1,300 passing yards. The next receiver was Eli Rogers of 594. You said the magic name. The magic name is Juju Smith. Like, Juju Smith last year as a rookie, yeah, AB still had like 1,500 yards and 9 touchdowns, but Juju had 917 and 7 touchdowns, and that was as a rookie. Now Juju Smith is just getting better to where it's like Big Ben doesn't have to go to AB all the time. He's got AB on one side, he's got Juju on the other, because like I mentioned the 24 and 15 for Antonio Brown, it's flipped for Juju. The week that AB had 24, Juju had 16.9. The week that AB had 15, Juju had 31 this past week. So for me, it's more of a, not that AB stinks, it's that Big Ben finally has a solid number 2 beside him who is going to rival him, and you're going to have maybe 2,000-yard receivers in the Steelers' offense compared to just AB, and then have a guy who maybe has 500 to 700 yards as your number 2 wide receiver.
And while that may be good for Pittsburgh as a whole, it's not a good thing
takes away
for a
from,
fantasy football player, because
but I wouldn't say I wouldn't worry about it. I would just, you know what? You might have to make waiver pickups, and in other spots where you're weaker, kind of make up for those points. But it's not like AB is now useless. It's just that's what the Steelers are, and now you have to game plan for it in a fantasy lineup. Do you trade AB? I mean, maybe, but I wouldn't, because he's always got that ability to be the big play. And who knows? Maybe Le'Veon comes back this year by week 10, where he has to come back in order to sign with a new team in the offseason. Maybe he comes back, and then everything is the status quo, and AB's numbers go up.
I think, possibly that's it, but through 2 games this season, 18 catches, 160 yards, and 1 touchdown, even in a PPR league, those are not the numbers that you are expecting from Antonio Brown. And so far, the Steelers team, through 2 weeks, 0-1-1, Ricky. That's also not the way that the Steelers were looking to start off. They were expecting, I'm sure, a 2-0 start.
Let me ask you this, and I'm only asking this because we talked about the Le'Veon contract holdout last week on the onside kick. Mark kept saying Big Ben hasn't been playing well this season. Is that why? Is that why we're seeing the damper in AB's production because Big Ben hasn't been playing well. He only has 787 passing yards and only 4 touchdowns so far.
What's your question again?
Is AB's hurtful production because Big Ben's not playing well? Is that another reason of like, because Mark kept bringing up, Big Ben doesn't look like Big Ben. Big Ben isn't playing well and didn't play well against the Browns because that's when we talked about the Steelers.
He played a lot better against the Chiefs, but the guy he's finding is Smith-Schuster.
Yeah.
That's who he's finding.
Or
That's the whole
Heath
thing.
Miller had some, not Heath Miller. Jesse James had some. White guy tight end had some big catches for the Steelers. Like there was one too where I know you don't have to survive the ground anymore, but it like gave me Vietnam flashbacks. I don't know why, because I'm not a Steeler fan. Of this last game when he hit the end zone and the ball came loose, I'm like, great, Jesse. You didn't learn your lesson after last year, hitting the ground in the end zone. I know you don't have to survive the ground anymore, but come on, man. You got to hang on to that ball, especially after last year. But, like, yeah, that's what I think it is, where it was like the other options didn't hurt Antonio Brown in the past because now the options, especially like Juju Smith-Schuster, the options are better than what the Steelers have had in past years.
No, I think you're absolutely right. I think that's part of the problem is Big Ben doesn't have to rely so much on AB anymore. And I don't want to say anymore like, oh, he's washed up, he's going away. That's not true. Antonio Brown's an outstanding talent, and any team would love to have him, and the Steelers do love having him. But you have to wonder, is his production going to pick up? Or is this what we're going to be seeing from Antonio Brown this season? Are we going to be seeing a guy who, after so many years living on cloud 9, is he finally going to fall back to earth? And as we say this, next week he'll put up a huge game.
50 points, shut us all up, shut the critics up.
But it does make you wonder. And I wanted to talk about it because it hasn't seemed like him. Like the 15-point performance, okay.
Yeah.
But I thought, he follows that up with a 20-point performance, 25 points, something like that. Because in a game, in a shootout, Antonio Brown is a guy who's never shut out. He was shut out yesterday. He had 67 receiving yards, and that's it. And in PPR, you look better because you get 15 points because you have 9 catches. Standard scoring, you had either 6 points or 6.7. That's not good. That's not going to win games for people.
No, it's not. It's not. And I mean, it's interesting because it's where do you...
I'm not saying drop him. I'm not saying drop him. I'm not saying try and go out and trade him away.
But I would say if a trade comes along, maybe in the past you're like, not a chance, he's untouchable. If somebody offers a trade for AB, maybe you entertain it and counteroffer and try to get what you want. Although I'm not saying go out. Like, it's not going to be our answer because Travis Kelce, we talked about the possibility of trading him last week. Our answer to everything isn't this guy sucks, trade him.
No.
But if someone offers for AB, maybe this is the year you go, hey, you know what? Let's see what I can get out of this other team. And you kind of entertain the offer where in past years you'd be, get the hell out of here, you troll.
Maybe you at least listen to it, but I still think it would be so hard to trade Antonio Brown.
It would what you want.
Oh, it would. I mean, it would have to be someone who's at least the same value, if not greater, because Antonio Brown has been just so good for so long.
Yeah.
And he will continue to be good for Pittsburgh, I believe. But again, that Pittsburgh team has to start playing better overall. But possibly defenses have started to just really hone in on him. And that might be clear that now a guy like Juju Smith-Schuster is running rampant down the field.
No, exactly. And then like yesterday, you even had James Washington. He had 1 reception yesterday against the Chiefs. It was a touchdown.
Yeah.
What if that touchdown would have went to AB instead? Like, there's even that too, where even the Rook is getting in and got a, I'm going to say, lucky touchdown because it was his only reception of the day.
And there you go. But, Ricky, now moving on, we had a lot of players play really well this past week. A lot of guys getting a lot of points. I'm going to throw it to you first. Who were, like I asked last week, who were 2, maybe 3 guys that you looked at, that you saw, and you just felt like These guys had outstanding weeks, and they should definitely be owned in your league if you don't have them. And even if they are owned, someone that you look at and you go, they continue to be consistent, this is someone who is going to help you get to the playoffs and possibly win you a championship.
I mean, this is one where I know he's owned in, like, the guys I'm going to give out for these two this week are going to be guys that are not owned, because I've got a couple guys when we talk about like waiver pickups for this week that I want to mention. But these are guys that are going to be pretty much owned, but if you have them, maybe they should be in your starting lineup. And the first one's Kirk Cousins, where yesterday, and maybe this is because I'm a Kirk Cousins owner, 4 touchdowns. He had 33.5 points in a PPR standpoint. He had 33 points for me in our standard league. He has been everything that I wanted at the quarterback position. He is definitely one that I'm like, yes, he is one that you really have to have if you're out there. And then like another one, I'm going to say, you know, I'm going to go with James. I know we talked about Le'Veon a couple weeks ago. This is one where it's like, if you have James Conner, maybe you're thinking about, he's one where I want on my team, but necessarily he had a down week compared to what he had in week 1 with only 19 compared to 34. I know it's a huge jump, but one guy that I think you should have in your leagues, this guy owned in 89% of leagues. I know Mark just picked him up before week 2, Chris Thompson. He's a guy in PPR standpoints, 24.8 week 1. He had 22.3 yet again. He's not going to be a rushing guy. He's going to be a passing guy out of the backfield. And Alex Smith has already proved that he likes him and he likes Jordan Reed. And so far with Chris Thompson, he's had over 20 points in PPR. If he is not owned in your league or you have Chris Thompson, he's got to become a must start each and every week, especially if you're in the PPR standpoint, or the PPR league, I should say.
I think that you're absolutely right. You hit it. You hit the nail on the head there. A couple of guys that I'm looking at, first from the wide receiver perspective. Number 1 is Kenny Golladay from Detroit.
Yep.
If you don't have Kenny Golladay, go get Kenny Golladay if he's
Perfect
even still available.
Example of bad team, but good fantasy guy to own, because they're 0-2.
Absolutely. But they did just lose a close one to the 49ers. They came back in that one 30-27. But Kenny Golladay is a guy that Matthew Stafford's looking for a lot down the sideline for sure. He's the guys who are going to be going deep are Kenny Golladay and Marvin Jones, with Golden Tate, your guy, over the middle. And everyone already knows you want to own Golden Tate, especially in those PPR leagues. But with Kenny Golladay, PPR, he's had 18 points and then 20 points. That's a guy that you definitely want to have on your team. And if he stays consistent and healthy throughout the season, that's going to be the type of points that you're getting from him each and every week. Another guy from the running back perspective, how about Austin Eckler?
Yep.
How about Austin Eckler?
Picked him up in our league.
This guy is pretty darn good. He had, I think 12 points this week, but last week broke out in a huge way. Yeah, over 20 points. But this is a backup. This is a backup running back. Melvin Gordon is the stud there for the Chargers. Eckler's your backup, and that's what he's getting. If Austin Eckler's available, go snag him. Because just in case Gordon gets hurt, but 2, the game scripts so far are showing they want to get Austin Eckler in that game. They see what he can do. Austin Eckler could probably be a starter somewhere else, and that team would be really happy to have him. But right now, he's doing really good things for San Diego. So this, slip of the tongue for Los Angeles and the Chargers. Man, I forget. But I think that Eckler is a guy. Eckler and Golladay, 2 guys, again, from this week that put up good performances after yet again a good week 1. 2 guys I think you got to target. And
really the only reason why he had the dip in points, especially on our standpoint because we're PPR, is week 1 against the Chiefs. He only had 5 rushes for 39 yards, but 5 points with 5 receptions and then 8.7 points through the air and a touchdown through the air whereas against Buffalo, he had about 77 yards rushing, but you don't get points for the 11 attempts, but he only had 3 receptions in week 2. So it's like with him, he's going to get the yards. It's just, will he have more? You want more receptions out of him than you do rushing attempts, because those receptions in PPR, you can get some easy points for, especially if he busts off a 30-yard catch like he did against the Chiefs.
Now, Ricky, to wrap things up here today, let's go with a couple of players that you're monitoring on the waiver wire this week. There's a lot of guys who had good performances this last week who could still be on the waiver wire, but probably not for long. Who are a couple of guys, name 2, maybe 3 guys that you're looking at that could be on the waiver wire that would be great pickups for this week, for week 3?
You know, I've got maybe 2 or 3. I'm going to look to maybe, do I have one more? I got 3 for you. 2 are wide receivers, and the first one is, I got to go with them. Got to throw some love to my former Illini bro in Geronimo Allison. This is a guy maybe more so in PPR standpoints than standard league. Like, if you're in a standard league, you're going to take Gmo as like, okay, he's on my bench. I may put him in if I think he's going to get a touchdown. Because he only had 69 and a touchdown week 1, 64 last week. So that's what, 6 points for you if you're in a standard league. But if you're in PPR, I'm going and grabbing this guy who's only in 20. He's only owned by 26% of teams in ESPN leagues. And he's a guy that had 17.9 in PPR week 1, still had 12.4 in week 2 because he had 6 receptions against the Vikings. He's a guy Aaron Rodgers is throwing to. So if you're in PPR, definitely snag Geronimo Allison. If you're in a standard format, you can still go after him, but he's kind of one that I would maybe, if you're in standard, kind of be like, maybe I can go somewhere else. One of the other receivers, and I just lost who he was. One guy I'm going to throw out then is basically Cole with the Jaguars. And the only reason I'm going to throw him out is because he had a really good week 2. He's one that you may want to, if you pick him up, monitor him for another week, see how he does, and then go ahead and kind of make a decision if you're going to go ahead and get him. Also, one guy that we're going to talk about tomorrow, you and I, because you're filling in for Mark on the onside kick. If for some reason you're in the 9% of ESPN leagues that has Josh Gordon on the waiver wire, just pick him up just to see what happens. Because now he's with the Patriots and not with the Browns, and the Patriots are a better franchise than the Browns. There's no shocker in that one. Last guy I'll mention is, and I'm going to say this name wrong probably, but Matt Breida. Matt Breida from San Fran. He's a guy, again, got consistently 11 carries. And what showed in week 2 was not that he stinks at running back, it's that the Vikings are really good at defense. And when he went up against the Lions, which is funny because Matt Patricia is supposed to be a defensive-minded guy, 138 yards and a touchdown, 24.9 points in our PPR standpoint, PPR league. So he's a guy that maybe you pick up. Maybe you don't start this week. Maybe he could be a flex if you start him, but he could be a guy you pick up and you're like, I'm going to monitor him. But he's kind of up there. 61% of leagues have him owned on teams.
Matt Breida was one of the guys I was going to mention as well. The only thing with Matt Breida that I would have a concern with is his volume. He only had 11 carries this past week. Yes, thank goodness for him breaking one of them. I think it was, 65 yards. He ended up having certainly over 120 yards on the day with a touchdown, but only on 11 carries. You take that carry away, and it's kind of a stinker of a day. So that would be the only thing that I'm looking at in terms of Breida is his volume and how much work he's actually getting on a game-by-game basis. One guy I would look at and possibly go and get, Jesse James from Pittsburgh, the tight end. Vance McDonald came back in week 2 for Pittsburgh, but Jesse James was still the focal point guy. In standard leagues, he had 6 points in week 1, bounced back with 19.8 against the Chiefs. That was certainly a great game, a career day for him, his first 100-yard game for Jesse James.
I found that wide receiver I was looking for. This guy is only owned in 9% of leagues. That's why he's a guy that's probably going to be there. And I would pick up, especially if you're in PPR, because if he does start getting more touchdowns, could be more valuable. D.D. Westbrook with the Jaguars had 10.1 in week 1. This week had 83 yards and a touchdown on 4 receptions for 17.7 in PPR standpoints. If you were in a PPR league, I take a look at D.D. Westbrook maybe as a claim and stash this week, because he could be, if he starts getting consistent touchdowns, if he gets you 17 points a week, you're happy with that. I know it's not going to be the 31 Adam Thielen performance, but 17.7 is still pretty good for maybe a flex spot or wide receiver 2 when we start getting to bye weeks.
And one final guy that I will mention because of an injury on his team, Giovanni Bernard from Cincinnati. He'll be taking over for the next couple of weeks for Joe Mixon. Mixon out with a knee injury for at least the next 2 weeks, 2 to 4 possibly. So Giovanni Bernard, you may want to target him. He is going to be the main guy there in the backfield for the Cincinnati Bengals.
One guy I'm going to ask you about is, and this is only because the starter did leave yesterday with an injury. Do you look into Chris Ivory at all if you are Buffalo? Like, if you're looking at Buffalo with LaShawn McCoy, and I know he's listed as questionable, but if that injury plays a little bit more into LaShawn McCoy, do you take a look at Chris Ivory if you're a LaShawn McCoy owner?
See, I only look into Chris Ivory when we find out the severity of LaShawn McCoy. Is because today Adam Schefter was reporting, yes, he's got a rib injury, but they don't know him, nor the team knows if he's going to be out, how long he'll be out, or anything like that. So there's no details surrounding that. So until we find out about what his condition is, what happened there, I'm not really going to go and look at Chris Ivory. If we find out, yep, he's out for a couple of weeks, yeah, I'll definitely go and look at Chris Ivory, especially a guy who's going to get looks at the goal line.
It's funny because LaShawn McCoy was the one where I was in agreement with Matthew Berry, basically 30-year-old running back, stay away from him, and so far 3.1 and then 10.8 through the first 2 weeks for LaShawn McCoy.
And Ricky, you're right. LaShawn McCoy was a guy I definitely wanted to stay away from at the beginning of the season. I wanted to stay away from him because I believed that he had an impending suspension possibly coming.
Well, there's that.
Because of that off-the-field stuff. But
plus, he was drafted by Dave, so you know that's not good.
But also, the problem is LaShawn McCoy, every single season, it seems, he has been injured. He has been injured at some point or another, whether it's a big injury or a small injury. There's always something that is ailing this guy, and I think he's getting to the end of his career. LaShawn McCoy has had a good one, but I think that we're seeing him get to the end of his career, and I think also him being on a poor team is going to speed that process up a little faster. Well, folks, that's going to wrap it up for us today. Another What's Your Fantasy episode with Brandon Swanson and Ricky Widmer.
It's already been 4 weeks. This is the 4th episode of What's Your Fantasy. It's just flying right by.
It is flying. It's flying right by. I'm loving every minute of it, though. It's been a whole lot of fun. And Ricky, thanks again for joining me each and every week. No problem. Having a blast.
It's going to be fun, especially if we go 2-0 this week, because we'll be at the top of the East Division still. The only one that I am not really excited to play in our division is I'm going to give you a fantasy update from our league. Jake's team, he's probably going to run away with everything because he had Tom Brady. Tom Brady had an off week, but 16.4. He's got Alvin Kamara, 17.9. Christian McCaffrey had 27.9 for him. He's got Juju Smith, so that's 31.1 right there. And he also had Kerryon Johnson, who had 11.6 points. Oh, and Jordan Reed, 9.5. Oh, and Tyreek Hill, 20 points. So he had 146.4 this week in his win. So it's not going to be fun when we have to play him twice a year. No. Maybe 3 times in the playoffs.
No, probably not. But we'll cross the bridge when we get there.
Oh, yeah.
When we get there. Well, just to finish a few things up, you can become a patron. Head to patreon.com. Support this podcast. Support a number of podcasts. You can come on a podcast for $10 a month. And you only have to do it one time. If you only want to come on one time, $10 for that month, and then you can be done. But you won't want to be, because once you're sucked in, you're in for life. I know you are, because it's that much fun. You'll enjoy it. You can come on this podcast, talk fantasy football. You can go and talk basketball on the Fast Break podcast. You can do a number of things. Again, go and support the channel MVP on patreon.com. Become a patron. Also, how about you sport some MVP gear? Wouldn't that be outstanding and a lot of fun? I know it would. I know it would, because that's what we do here at MVP. We sport it every single week. Isn't that right, Ricky?
It is. We do, except for you.
That's right. He is not incorrect. But go to mostvaluablepodcast.com and you can see Dave Oster wearing the T-shirt. Make sure you go and get that T-shirt, be walking around and be a walking billboard for MVP and just feel good. I hear that you feel good wearing MVP gear.
It's a good shirt. I like it. I like it a lot. Like, I wear mine a ton on all the podcasts. Sometimes I wear it to bed.
And sometimes he wears it to do other things as well.
Sometimes I just wear it around the house. Sometimes I wear it out with friends. It's just a good regular T-shirt to have.
It's a good wearing out shirt.
Like you like MVP. Let people know what MVP is, because I'll ask you about it.
And then make sure you hit up iTunes and give us that 5-star rating. And we're still waiting to have iTunes put us up. What's your fantasy? But while we're waiting for you to rate this show, make sure you go and check out all the other shows and podcasts on MVP and give them that 5-star rating, because, Ricky, we are not a couple of good old boys.
No, we're not. And I hate that that's the only comment on the Primetime podcast.
Ricky hates it so
really
much
grinds my gears.
that he is going to go on and he is going to comment something different. So that's not the only guy. He's going to use his burner account.
Ooh.
Oh, boy.
Colangelo right there. Going to use my burner account.
Well, everybody, that is going to wrap it up for us tonight. Again, a ton of fun talking fantasy football. It is a great time of year. It is going to be week 3 this week. Enjoy it. For Ricky Widmer, I'm Brandon Swanson saying so long, everybody.